With oil down about $1, we have a major shakeup in the world's biggest oil producer, Saudi Arabia. It's got market watchers watching an upcoming IPO. King Salman, breaking with royal tradition, has just ousted his nephew as his successor and replaced him with the man you see there with President Trump. His own son, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who, in a probable sign of what was to come, had just met with President Trump 3 months ago. The newly crowned prince is also the mastermind behind what could be a gigantic $2 trillion IPO listing of Saudi Aramco. Joining us now, Charlie Gasparino. Charlie, you've been ahead of everybody on this. Are investors worried?
Yeah, I think they're worried about it not reaching that $2 trillion valuation. Now, let's just be real clear what Saudi Aramco is. It's kind of like a sovereign wealth fund for Saudi Arabia. It's part of the government. It handles all their infrastructure projects, or a lot of them. It does a lot of various functions for people in that country. It's obviously a large employer, but it's owned by the government. And its main sort of line of business is oil. And what they're trying to do by spinning it out as a separate company, right, what they're trying to do is diversify their economy. Go not just for oil, but, you know, maybe Saudi Arabia as a tech center, you know, the Middle East. I mean, that's kind of what they're envisioning. That's why they need to raise the money for this thing and put it to work. Here's what they're doing. Now, we should point out this IPO, planned IPO, they want to get a $2 trillion valuation, which would make it twice as large as Apple, the biggest listed stock that I know. I think Apple's about a $1 trillion valuation, somewhere in that line. I mean, it's been off recently, so maybe it's below that, but just below that. This would be twice as high. They're doing that in the face of declining oil prices. So the likelihood of the $2 trillion valuation, particularly if the oil prices remain where they are now or, you know, go down a little lower, which is very possible given the fact that, you know, let's face it, U.S. keeps producing oil. We are now a major oil producer. There is downward pressure on oil. Saudi Arabia does not control the float anymore in the oil market. So if that does happen, this...
So how hot could the Aramco IPO be? Is that cooling down?
Well, here's what I will say is this. The positive, the negative is declining oil prices. Okay, the positive is that they would be IPOing in an era where there hasn't been many IPOs. I mean, when was the last IPO? Big Snap, and look what happened there. I mean, I would rather own Saudi Aramco, if you think about it. They do have a business than Snap. So,
and if you buy it when it's going through tough times, there's always the chance that it will, of course, gain a foothold.
Right. So the things you look at is this. Look at, I mean, I think this is a net positive for the stock. The fact that a new generation of Saudi leaders is in there. They're thinking of the future. Thinking they're more pro-Western, maybe.
When is this supposed to go public?
Early next year, from the schedule. But that all could change.
Do you think it'll be oversubscribed with interest?
This is the interesting thing. It's kind of a novelty. It's there aren't many IPO. I think the IPO calendar is going to grow leaps and bounds in the next year.
And it's not really transparent right now, so they would have to then reveal a lot of what goes on.
Right. We're gonna see that in the. That's going to be a fascinating read. They're offering documents. So that's where we are right now. I don't think it'll get. I mean, think about this: a $2 trillion IPO. Let's say they do half of that, a $1 trillion. They're still right now. If they did it today, they still would be probably larger.
Do we know where it will list?
Now that is a big question. That has a lot of bankers chasing that. And what bankers are telling the Fox Business Network, they are leaning heavily towards the New York Stock Exchange, not the NASDAQ.
But that's here. But then they would also list in Hong Kong or somewhere else?
They could, but their primary listing would be here. But here's the thing. Here's why that's a big slap in the face to NASDAQ. And it would be a huge slap in the face to Dina Friedman, the new NASDAQ CEO. NASDAQ handled did a lot of stuff, had some relationship with Saudi Aramco in terms of providing information and data. The fact that they are kind of like ignoring someone who did work with them to go to the New York Stock Exchange is kind of a big thing for NASDAQ. So right now, it's New York's to lose, from what I understand. The bankers are pushing Saudi Aramco heavily to go to the New York Stock Exchange and do a blowout, you know, IPO on the floor and everything else. That, by the way, that's going to be a spectacle.
Huge.
If they tried to throw us out of that one, remember how they did that one time?
Twitter.
New York Stock Exchange tried to
Me and Charlie.
They tried to manhandle Fox Business.
Tried to complain about us.
And then they complained about us after we beat the hell out of them for 3 days. And
Dick Costolo may be on a list to replace Travis Kalanick of Uber.
Oh, really?
No way, right? He's Unemployed at the moment, except that he works on that show, Silicon
Post
Valley.
had a nice story about Sheryl Sandberg, possibly, but I don't.
That makes sense
but,
too.
You know,
he's got to want.
Kara Swisher, who's a friend of mine, she knows everything about this tech world. She says no way. So I don't know.